If you keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners, there is nothing wrong with you. There's just a deeper spiritual lesson that's happening underneath. Let's talk about where it comes from and how you can call in a healthy, safe, and emotionally available partner in your future. Hi, my name is Michelle Fondin. I am the author of 12 published books, including The Empowered Divine Feminine, Becoming an Unstoppable Woman in the 21st Century and Beyond. And in the 6th chapter of this book, I talk about redefining romantic relationships for you. This also pertains to my upcoming book, Love Me Unconditionally, a spiritual guide to self-love that will be released in May of 2026. If you are new to this channel, I want to welcome you here. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Let's dive into this topic about attracting in emotionally unavailable partners. But first, I really want to open up to you. In preparing for this video, it hit me like super hard. I knew the topic, I knew the bullet points, but as I was moving through the bullet points, something happened in me. I got triggered because I realized that even after all of my inner work and of course, writing all these books, that I have never attracted in an emotionally available romantic partner. That's why it hit me hard, because I really had to look at this in the face. And what I also realized is that healing and moving to a higher level for yourself is not linear. That as we are healing, as we are uncovering the layers of our wounds from the past, that things might just get uncovered at a specific time when we are ready to see it. That's obviously what happened to me this week as I was preparing to do this video. So this one hits really close to home, you guys, and I might get a little vulnerable in this video. And for that reason too, the video might get a little bit long, because when you realize that this is something that you've dealt with your entire life, it can be really hard to face, especially when you want to attract in a romantic partner who's healthy and that you've been working on yourself as well. So let's uncover this crazy topic that affects so many of us on a very intimate level. Let's explore first the real reason that this pattern exists, like the real reason why you keep attracting in romantic partners who are emotionally unavailable. The real reason, as I mentioned, is not that you are broken. And it's not that I am broken either. It's that we are attracting in familiar patterns. We're not attracting in a specific person, we're attracting in familiar patterns. Something that feels extremely familiar to what we experienced as children. I speak a lot about this in my vlog that I posted on Tuesday, vlog number 22, and I'll post that link right here. So this pattern of emotional unavailability feels familiar on some level. It's something that we've already dealt with. It's something we've already developed coping mechanisms for. And so it feels safe and familiar. Why? Usually it's one of our parents that acted or reacted in this way, where they were emotionally unavailable. We wanted to be open and vulnerable as children are wont to do, but we weren't able to, because instead of becoming intelligent in our own emotional patterns, we were trying to cope with our parents' emotions. And so we didn't learn how to understand our own feelings and emotions. And so that process of understanding our feelings and emotions got delayed, perhaps up until now, that it got delayed because we were so busy trying to figure out the emotionally unavailable parents' emotions. And a lot of times it was about zigzagging. I journaled about this last night, and I was wondering why this topic was so triggering to me. And I journaled the reason why. Why is that triggering for me? And why did I feel like my emotions did not matter? And it's because when you have an emotionally unavailable parent, it feels like you are zigzagging. You're just trying to figure out what their next mood is going to be or what their next reaction is going to be. And that was certainly the case for me. Growing up with a mentally ill, emotionally unavailable mother meant that I was just developing coping mechanisms for her behavior. I was trying to either appease her or stay out of her way. Now, this doesn't make her a bad person. It made her a person who is not mentally healthy or emotionally healthy. And as a child, when you grow up with that, you are just trying to cope. And so for me personally, it was never about my feelings. It was never about how I was feeling, understanding my feelings, understanding my emotions. Never. It was always about trying to manage her feelings. And because of that, I put my feelings on the back burner. I put my feelings by the wayside. What I learned was that my feelings really didn't matter. And so what does that create? And what it created for me was that I got into this pattern of why even try? Why even try sharing my feelings because it doesn't matter anyway? And so that is how you end up drawing in an emotionally avoidant or an emotionally unavailable partner because you are used to those ways of interacting. For you, it signals love. For you, it signals this is how we love each other. You have your emotions and I cope with your emotions, or I try to appease you. And that's certainly what has happened for me in my past relationships. As a result, if you have dealt with this like I did in my childhood, you learn how to cope in love, but you don't learn how to receive love. It's a really difficult jump from coping with someone and their emotions and feeling like that is love and receiving love for yourself. In other words, emotional unavailability feels normal. It feels normal. Isn't that insane to say? It feels normal because your inner child is saying this is normal, this is safe, this is the usual. Even if your adult self is saying, this does not resonate with me, I want so much more. And guess what? Since your inner child is usually the one in this case ruling the roost, your inner child wins until you are able to reparent that inner child and help that inner child understand that this is not love, this is coping. This is coping with something that is emotionally very unhealthy. But meanwhile, you might still be attracting partners in who are emotionally unavailable, or you just might be choosing them. And so here are a few ways to tell if you are actually either magnetizing in, attracting in emotionally unavailable partners, or that you're actively choosing them. So the first one is, are you drawn to partners who are hot and cold? Either they are super intense and super on, And then they are completely cold. They might ghost you. They might forget to call you or text you. They might disappear for days on end. Are you drawn to partners who are unpredictable, meaning they do not follow a predictable pattern? They are not reliable. And this was certainly the case for me in so many of my relationships, from my husband at the time. Right after I left my parents' home, I entered into my marriage where my ex-husband chose a job where he was gone like 3 to 4 weeks out of the month. And so I specifically chose not only a partner who was hot and cold, but unpredictable in his patterns of availability as well. Are you choosing or drawn to partners who are distant or avoidant, or that don't make themselves available? For example, they could be married to someone else, as an example, or they could be in a romantic relationship with somebody else, or you could be the third party where you're maintaining the relationship, but they are still committed to somebody else as well. And you kind of like the danger, you like the intensity. Now, I am saying this from a first person standpoint, that for me, intensity meant love. Passion, like crazy passion, meant love. Unpredictability meant I needed to win them over somehow. And so those are all signs that you might be dealing with someone who is emotionally unavailable. So in this case, you are confusing intensity for intimacy. You mistake that sense of like anxiety or needing to see them for chemistry. You feel like you need to earn love. Basically, you need to work really, really hard to get the love that you desire, or you might work really hard to overgive to only get breadcrumbs in return. And so a lot of this sounds like the twin flame journey, doesn't it? But maybe this is the biggest lesson that we are learning if you are indeed on the twin flame journey and you see a lot of these emotionally unavailable patterns. Maybe that is the wound that is surfacing for you. Maybe that is the lesson for you and me that we are needing to overcome to choose love that is stable, authentic, real, present, available, reliable, and compassionate. If this is starting to resonate with what you have chosen for your romantic partners in the past, let's take a break here, because it can be easy, like it was for me last night, to go into this triggered mode where you feel like, where have I gone wrong? How have I failed so miserably at this? How do I keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners, even though I've been really working on myself? That I've really been doing the work, taking a look at myself and my patterns. Why does this stuff keep happening? So let's outline, why does this stuff keep happening? And it's really your inner child that is not healed. And it's your inner child that's really calling to be healed. And as I mentioned in the previous section of the video, that maybe this is the opportunity. Perhaps you are on that twin flame journey, you're seeing a lot of these same patterns, and this is the opportunity for that specific healing. So maybe when you were a child, when you were small, you felt like you had to walk on eggshells around your parent who is emotionally unavailable. And then if you find yourself walking on eggshells with a romantic partner because you're not sure of their mood, if they are quiet and brooding and you think, oh, that's sexy, they're quiet and brooding, but really they're just very moody and they tend to hold in their emotions and maybe blow up a little later, that's not sexy because it's not emotionally available and it's not loving, it's not kind. And really, it's not kind to themselves either if they're holding back their emotions to later blow up at some point in the future, because rest assured, they're going to feel bad about blowing up. The child within, the unhealed inner child, can also feel hyper vigilant. What does this mean? Okay, this has happened to me so many times. So if you grew up with an emotionally unavailable parent, you are hyper sensitive, hyper vigilant to their signals. Their signals might not even be verbal. They could be nonverbal. And a lot of times when you were a kid, they were nonverbal. The parent didn't even have to say anything. You would pick up on their vibes. And so you learn to become very sensitive to the slightest change of mood, the slightest change of vibration. Let me give you an example where this has happened to me and with me. When I start dating someone, and of course, as I mentioned already, my track record has been dating people who are not readily emotionally available. When we're on track, meaning we text and call, go on a date, the date goes really, really, really well. There is some messaging after that date, and maybe there is a promise of a second date. So maybe that second date happens, it goes really, really, really well. There's a conversation after the date, and then there is a void of conversation for maybe a day or two. For someone who is emotionally healthy on both sides, meaning they are both emotionally available, this could be a normal pause, right? A normal pause where maybe you've been on a couple of dates, it seems to be going well, the flow is there, there's nothing wrong, and maybe there's just a day or two of non-communication. If you wait out those 2 days, for example, maybe the third day the conversation will pick back up. So someone who is used to being hyper vigilant or hypersensitive, they will think, as I have done in the past, they will think, oh no, something is wrong. They're not texting me, they're not calling me. We had a great date and now they've disappeared. They're not here. So that is not a direct reflection on that person. That is your inner child reacting with the same coping mechanism that you had with an emotionally unavailable parent. For me personally, and I wrote this in my journal last night, for me, my mother was constantly late. Now, we're not talking about 1 or 2 minutes late to pick up, whether it was pick up from a sport, an activity, or school. My mother was routinely 20 to 30 to 45 minutes to an hour late, even when I was very, very tiny, when I was very small, meaning 5, 6, 7 years old. And of course, this creates a lot of anxiety, right? What if my mom forgot me? She probably forgot me. What if she got into an accident? And this was before the age of cell phones, so there was no calling or texting. So when you're a child, when you're hardwired with, I've been abandoned, maybe my parent is dead, maybe my parent is not coming to get me, coming to pick me up, that 2 days of non-communication after a promise of a love connection can feel like eternity. And so what happens when you are experiencing emotional unavailability, not only in yourself, but the other person, and we'll talk about you in a minute, but you start to go into overdrive, that hyper vigilance. You go into overdrive. You might wait 24 hours and then text them. What happened? Is something wrong? Did I say something? Did I do something? Are you not interested in me? And then in fact, it is that tends to ruin the connection. Inner child needing to be healed. The other thing is maybe staying small to avoid anger. So let's go back to that scenario where you had a couple of great dates and there was maybe a gap in the texting or calling. non-communication. You don't really know if they're interested or not. Maybe you think they probably are, but you might play it small. So meaning you might be a little concerned or worried, and rather than texting or calling, you just wait for them to reach out. And when they do, you become a little bit quiet. You decide to close up a little bit more and maybe not share as much as you shared in the beginning because you're afraid of what their reaction might be. So that would be playing it small rather than maybe saying, once you guys see each other for the third time, saying like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, I wasn't sure if we were all good because, we had that great date the second time and then I didn't hear from you for a couple of days. And, I was just wondering if everything was good for you, and allowing them to explain maybe the gap in communication. So you have a voice, they have a voice, and you're just talking things through, but you're not making yourself so small that your needs, wants, desires, your voice are completely insignificant. So again, making yourself very small so as to not disturb the other person. That is that inner child wound as well. One thing that I would really like to address, and my upcoming book, Love Me Unconditionally, A Spiritual Guide to Self-Love, is really going to address a lot about this inner child healing. But in my book, The Empowered Divine Feminine, I also address speaking to your inner child to discover, hey, what's going on and what's going on in relationships, because that is super useful to really pinpoint where that wound actually is. Here's something that might be really hard to hear. And it was hard for me to hear as well. I had heard this a little further back, super hard for me to hear. But you magnetizing in emotionally unavailable partners usually indicates that there is some emotional unavailability in you as well. Why do I say this? Because relationships are our mirror, right? We draw in a partner, a friendship, a colleague, a work situation. We call in relationships in our lives that are a direct reflection of where we are at. Now, it may not be exacting, but it seems to be pretty darn close. So if you are continually drawing in partners who are emotionally unavailable, it means that there is an aspect of you and me that is still emotionally unavailable. So let's explore this one for a little bit. When you grow up with a parent who is emotionally unavailable, you learn that emotional closeness is not favored. You learn that emotional closeness is something that you did not receive, and so it feels very foreign to you. It feels almost invasive because your parent did not have the capacity, the mental capacity, maybe the physical capacity, or maybe the emotional capacity to hold space for you, to hold space for your emotions, to hold space for you in all the emotions that you hold, whether they are good or bad, right? Because that is the important part about emotional availability, is having someone to hold the space for you for the full gamut, the full spectrum of emotions, good and bad, and to also be able to hold that space for yourself, and you hold that space for them, that whole gamut, good and bad. Now, as a child, since you are not taught how to do that, like I said, we react by coping mechanisms. And a lot of that is running away from the parent who is supposed to be taking care of you, running away from the parent when they are emotionally bad to you, okay? So if there is a parent that yells, that shouts, that screams, that cries, that hurls things at you, that throws things at you, who is completely out of control with their negative emotions, what children typically learn as coping mechanisms is to run and hide, or to not enter the space where their emotionally unavailable parent is at the time that they are angry, enraged, depressed, whatever those negative emotions happen to be. And so what you learn as a child is to run away from that, right? To not get close to that, and to maybe also ignore those feelings within yourself, so that when you are angry, you run away from yourself. When you are depressed, you run away from yourself. We're not taught how to adequately cope and hold space for those emotions, those negative ones, as well as the positive ones. And so we tend to close ourselves off and run away. So emotional closeness can feel very foreign. So when I say you might also be emotionally unavailable, what that means is you might be available for the good stuff, for the hugs and the kisses and the I love yous, but as soon as it starts to turn in the other direction, you might run for the hills because you don't know how to deal with that. You've never been taught how to deal with that. What you've learned as a child is that distance feels safer than emotional intimacy. You truly learned that with an emotionally unavailable parent. You learned, if I keep my distance, I will be okay until they are in a better mood. Right? So there was no talking this through. There was no, let's all talk about our feelings. It was more like, this parent is completely out of control. They don't understand their emotions. They don't know how to say they're sorry. They do not know how to cope or manage with life. So I will keep my distance. I will stay away. So when you start to realize this, you can start to heal by becoming emotionally available to yourself, to recognizing your feelings in every situation, to recognizing your emotions in every situation, and to begin to reparent yourself, to begin to say to yourself, it's okay if occasionally I'm feeling anger or frustration. It's okay if I'm feeling some of those more negative emotions. That is actually okay. And it's okay too when I'm feeling this sense of opening and love and vulnerability, because those feelings are okay too. Through this recognition, already I believe, this is what I believe, and this is what I told myself last night. Through this recognition that I am constantly attracting in emotionally unavailable partners, romantic partners, therefore, that must mean that there is some of that that still exists within me, that still exists in here, right? That I am somehow reacting from the point of view of my younger self, my inner child. I believe that recognition in and of itself is extremely healing, because you've already opened the lid on the matter to be healed. So that's incredible. Congratulations. And I'm going to pat myself on the back too. So I feel like just opening that lid and coming to that recognition, the healing process can begin. Now, it's important when you realize that you're attracting in emotionally unavailable partners that you redefine what love is, that you start to redefine what love means for you, okay? So for example, going from chaotic, chaos, the mess that often emotionally unavailable parents create, into calm, serene. That love is calm. Real love is serene. Even when there's problems, real love is calmer. It's not chaos. That instead of being super intense, like even in the passionate, like, I love you, I love you, I love you, you know, we know how sometimes passionate love can get really intense, but it can also get intense in the bad stuff too, right? So instead of intense, like hot and cold, up and down, roller coaster ride intense, that we can opt for more intimacy, that we can opt for more consistency, right? So consistency and intimacy is going to open the doors to have love that feels better in the long run. Instead of seeking out the falling in love feeling of the butterflies, right? Like a lot of people get addicted to that. Like, I love it when I first fall in love, or I first have a love interest and I feel those butterflies and I can't sleep and I can't eat and it feels amazing. They get addicted to that feeling of constant butterflies. Maybe we trade the butterflies in the feeling of falling in love for safety and security, right? Someone who is reliable, someone who shows up, someone who is extremely consistent in what they say or do, that it's not this feeling of maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's someone who consistently is there and is very predictable in their patterns of reliability. And for someone who was raised with an unpredictable parent, that can feel very uneasy because it's almost as if you wouldn't believe them, right? It's like, I don't really believe you that you're going to be consistent and show up. And instead of having the ups and downs of the roller coaster of emotions, that if you pick someone who is more steady in their emotions, not so high and low, not so up and down, not so bipolar in their emotions, but something that is more steady and growing, right? And what I like to say is we need something that is going to grow, like eventually growing up the mountain, right? So at a very slower pace rather than this high of the roller coaster that you feel the butterflies, you get together, it's intense, it's passionate, you fall in love, and it's all the way at the top of the mountain within a few days, maybe. And then it comes crashing down. And instead of that, we want a steady climb up that mountain, a very slow and steady climb, so that you're really authentically getting to know one another and really building something that's authentic and real. This is something that's certain for future videos, because already I can tell this video is getting quite long, but doing the self-work that is going to help you redefine your love blueprint. So instead of what you were raised with, instead of the chaos, instead of the coping mechanisms that you and I dealt with the emotionally unavailable parent, you start to write down the traits that you desire in someone who is emotionally available. What does that even look like for you? It might take some real thought to apply. What does this look like for me? And write it down. Like, what am I willing to put up with? What are the deal breakers? What are my boundaries? What does an emotionally available partner look like? And if you don't know, you can ask friends that you know are in a healthy relationship. Practice emotional availability with yourself by journaling, having self-soothing practices, speaking with your inner child, doing inner child work. And here's a little teaser for next week's theme. If it feels like longing, if it feels like butterflies, if it feels just slightly out of reach, if it feels like you almost need to chase or pursue the person in order to make it happen, it's not love, it's a wound being revealed. Okay, I'll say that again. If you are in a situationship, relationship, dating situation where you feel that the person is slightly out of reach, where you feel the butterflies, you feel the passion, you feel the drive, you might have those highs and lows of those feelings, and you feel almost like the person's like just right there, they're just out of reach, and you feel like you might want to be proactive and take action to pursue the person or chase the person in any way. Just know that chasing is not love. It's a wound surfacing to be healed. So in my book, as I mentioned, The Empowered Divine Feminine, Becoming an Unstoppable Woman in the 21st Century and Beyond, chapter 6 is all about redefining romantic relationships. I go into several scenarios of the types of relationships we choose when we don't have that concept of self-love. So you can read over those. But this is a continuing conversation because I found that there was so much in it in my journey. For example, I feel like for a lot of people, this is a huge issue of having dealt with emotionally unavailable parents growing up. And so now they've carried it into adulthood, into their adult romantic relationships, even if on an intellectual level, it's not what you want, right? It's like, I don't want this. I want someone who's emotionally available. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more, not only now and upcoming, but also as it gets closer to next year when my self-love book will be published. We're really gonna talk a lot about this topic. So if this resonated with you, that is amazing. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that you're awakening. Like I said, that lid of recognition is opened. And so now that it's opened, now that you know, the healing can begin even if you don't do anything active in the immediate sense of the term. For it to heal, it will start healing for you because other things will come up that are adjacent to that and you will start to heal. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for this video that really means so much to me, and I hope it did to you too. Thank you for putting a comment in the comment section below, subscribing to the channel, giving the video a thumbs up, sharing this with others that could use a little insight on this topic. Thank you so much for your support of my YouTube channel. You can purchase one of my 12 published books. Check out my website, michellefondinauthor.com. I have so many resources for you there. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I will see you in the next video.